right, so tomorrow is the day. Don't forget you need to be at school by the 4000 building at about 11:30 for tomorrow. Real quick, I'm just going to go through a couple of things, just a couple of reminders for your exam tomorrow. First off, I want to remind you of your location. So this is posted on Google Classroom, as you can see. And please make sure that you look at your room assignments. Some information that they have for you is that you need to arrive no later than 11:30 for your 12 p.m. exam. Please bring a pencil, pen, and obviously you cannot use a calculator for this class. Black or blue ink pen, number 2 pencil. You need a snack or a lunch, so don't forget to bring something, especially if you have AP Gov in the morning. You may have about 10 minutes or so to run out, go to the bathroom, and have a snack in between the multiple choice and the free response. Bring a sweater. Do not bring your cell phone. Electronic devices are not allowed in the testing room. If you bring your cell phone, you have to give it up. So just don't bring it, put it in your locker, leave it someplace else. Leave it in your car, you're not going to be able to use it anyway. So just make sure you either don't have it or you end up having to check it before you go into the room. So our exam is tomorrow, May 10th. Here are the room assignments you can see, kind of in this highlighted color. So these are the rooms. A through H is 4111, K through PH 4109, PI through Z 4107. If you have extended time, you've been given that information already. So, don't forget, for tomorrow you have 100 multiple choice questions, 90 minutes. You have 4 free response questions and 90 minutes. I mentioned to you, you really need to keep track of your own time. They don't give you a lot of hints and clues about how much time you have left. Please bring a watch. Okay. You're probably going to have an exam sheet that looks like this. I don't know how to change the format here, but this is something that you'll see. So it gives you a little bit of an idea what you're going to see as far as your booklet information. Page 2, also they're going to ask you some survey questions. You'll have to answer those. Let's see here. All right, and you filled in a lot of this stuff already. So what I wanted to do is go through a couple of the most missed questions from the practice exam. So if you haven't taken it yet, you'll be taking a different one because obviously I'm going over some of the most missed, which you guys did intos today in class on. But just to start, for the beginning part, just don't forget to read the directions. It says that you're going to use each answer choice once, more than once, or not at all in each set. Please read the directions. Maybe they'll change it up this year. I highly doubt it, but this is always the format. So, the most missed so far from this part, number 1 and number 2. Number 1 says marine sediments that form limestone are major sink for this element. So limestone is calcium carbonate, and here that word carbonate and carbon is found in our limestone. So the answer is the letter A. You see calcium carbonate later on in this exam because it also talks about it being used to buffer an acid. Don't forget when we burn coal, which produces sulfur, if we burn it with our calcium carbonate or limestone, it helps to neutralize that acid. So number 1 was C. Number 2, another most missed, guano from fish-eating birds is a commercial source of this element. So guano is basically bat feces, and don't forget our fecal matter is composed of phosphorus. So guano is bat feces, which is phosphorus. So it was the answer D. You guys did pretty well on 7 through 9. They gave you some laws. Number 5 was the most missed. It contains an amendment that allows private landowners to modify their property under a habitat conservation plan. So a habitat conservation plan is part of the Endangered Species Act, and it's part of what's called an incidental take permit. And basically, if you own land that has an endangered species, you would have to get an incidental take permit in order to, I guess, develop that land, use it for whatever you're planning on using it for, as long as it doesn't make the last of those species go extinct. So a habitat conservation plan is under the Endangered Species Act. Moving on to our next most myths. Number 16, which you've seen before. A little bit of math here, not difficult at all. So the clock draws 2 watts of power to operate, and it's in operation for 8,600 hours per year. The energy usage of the clock is in kilowatt hours per year. It's closest to, notice that they're asking you for kilowatts, and they give you watts, so you're going to have to use some King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk. So 2 watts is going to give us 0.002 kilowatts if we move the decimal 3 places to the left. And then in order to get kilowatt hours, all we have to do is multiply those two together. So we're going to multiply 0.002 times 8,600 hours, and we end up getting about 17.2 kilowatt hours. So it's closest to the letter E, which is 17. Moving on, number 32. Scrolling. Okay, 32. The increase in mean global temperature is likely the result of all of the following except. So the word except there. It is going to decrease the size of Greenland ice sheet. Don't forget when we talk about global climate change, Greenland melting is one of the main contributors to increasing our sea level. Obviously, we said thermal expansion is number 1. Increasing the range of some plant species, so this means that maybe some plants will be able to survive further from the equator. Increased populations of insects, warmer temperatures obviously is going to be breeding grounds for mosquitoes because warmer water, standing water, is going to increase those vectors. I'm going to skip over D because that's the answer, and increase in sea level is true. So, global climate change has really nothing to do with UV radiation. So because of climate change, it's not going to increase UV radiation. This is related to the thinning of the ozone layer. So try and keep those two separate. Next most myths, we have this picture. And the picture gives you some information. Please make sure you read these sentences. Any student I talked to in class today regarding this picture just looked straight at the questions. They didn't even read the sentences below the picture. It's really important that you read everything. So it says 34 through 36 refer to the diagram, gives you some information. 34 says, how many units of energy, this is the most myths, do greenhouse gases contribute to the greenhouse effect? So here we have our greenhouse gases and emitted to the atmosphere, and we have 60 units that are contributing to the greenhouse effect on Earth. The rest of those 60 here are going out into space, or the 70 once we include the stuff that's coming from the clouds. But 60 right here are contributing to the greenhouse effect. And then we have 10 that's coming from our clouds. So greenhouse gases should be 60 in the letter C. Number 35, how many units of energy absorbed by the Earth's surface? A lot of students were like nervous and they just read absorbed by surface and they put 50. But that is absorbed by the surface as well as those greenhouse gases. It's showing you that they're absorbed too. So we did 50 plus 70, which gave you the correct answer of 120. And then number 36, how many units of energy are returned to space from Earth and its atmosphere? We're going to add 5 plus, let's see here, 25, and then 70 emitted back out into space. And so most of you got that one right, to be 100. Confusing diagram, but not something that's not doable. Number 39. Which of the following is most likely to reduce the United States' contribution to the increase in concentration of atmospheric CO2? So the answer here is the letter D. It's not letter A. So requiring all farming practices to be organic. This is about like not using pesticides. You can still use heavy machinery. If you guys remember, we talked about the bug vac, and that is getting rid of pests, but it's using fossil fuels and contributing to CO2, so it's not A. Stopping logging, so that would help CO2. Letter C, switching fuel used for residential heating from oil to coal, that would make it worse. Remember, coal is the dirtiest of the three. And then D was correct. And then preventing depletion of the stratospheric ozone layer is completely unrelated. So the answer for that one, as I just told you, was the letter D. So switching from cars and trucks to mass transit. So we're going to reduce the amount of CO2 that's going into the atmosphere, at least in the United States. Number 48. Number 48 says an effective short-term remediation strategy for the ponds. Oh, and it gives you some background information. In 1950, the pH of the pond water is 8.2. In 2000, it had decreased to 5.2. So obviously, we're understanding that the pond is becoming acidic. How could we help? Not by building taller smokestacks. That's not helping. Still putting, I'm assuming, sulfur into the atmosphere, which is causing acid rain. Fertilizers have nothing to do with the pH. So if we're relating to fertilizer runoff, it would be say something about eutrophication. Brown trout have nothing to do with it. Calcium carbonate. So again, this was what I was just talking about a second ago. Calcium carbonate, which is basically limestone, this is used to neutralize acid. So it's the same reason why we burn coal with calcium carbonate in order to neutralize that, that sulfur. And tertiary wastewater treatment removes nitrogen and phosphorus. So that, again, is kind of related to fertilizer runoff because that has to do with nitrogen and phosphorus. Number 51. I assume you're going to see a whole lot of these tables like this where they give you an experiment and a couple questions about it. Many times they're not difficult. They look long. They look like they're going to take some time to read. But number 51, so they give you this experiment. It says a series of experiments was designed to test the effects of UV radiation on the productivity of polar phytoplankton. So phytoplankton that's living in the poles. And samples of these single-celled organisms were placed in 4 tanks, which were exposed to ambient natural solar radiation and to 3 modifications of ambient radiation. The design of the experiment is shown on the table, along with measurements of photosynthesis in each tank. Here are the different tanks. No added treatment. You can see that 22, this is milligrams per meter squared hour. And so this is the amount of CO2 is taken up. So we're assuming that the higher the number, the more photosynthesis that's happening, and therefore the more phytoplankton we have. So 51 says, which 2 tank comparisons provide the strongest evidence that the presence of UV light at natural levels inhibits photosynthesis? We're obviously looking for extremes here. We want to see how we can say that UV light is harmful to the phytoplankton. And so when we look at this, it says filters to remove all UV light, 720. So that means that like they're able to thrive without UV light versus the no added treatment, which was 22. So we can see the biggest like situation here with no added treatment and with, they're both absolutes, they're both definitive. So the answer is A. And number 53. Which of the following would be the most likely effect of acid deposition in the northern forest? So the answer here was A. A lot of students, I think, put B. So decreased concentration of hydrogen ions in the soil. This would increase the concentration of hydrogen ions in the soil. And the reason why is because that is referring to an acid. So we're seeing more acids in the soil, and so that would be the opposite. That would say increase if that were true. Letter D, increased buffering capacity. If you want to buffer, you're going to increase the pH. So it's not going to have a better buffering capacity. And the other ones really don't make any sense. Moving on to 61. Which of the following is a primary air pollutant produced from burning coal? Pull out those note cards if you still happen to have them. And the only one of these that's actually a primary air pollutant is the letter A. CFCs are secondary, PCB is secondary, ozone secondary, sulfuric acid secondary. Don't forget, primary means that the air pollutant is put directly into the atmosphere. Secondary is saying that that pollutant is going to combine in the atmosphere. Many times they are acids. So, or they're just, if you think about it, they're not as simple as the primary air pollutants. Number, let's see, 72. So factors that increase the spread of infectious disease include all of the following. The answer is following except D. So flooding, that could increase the spread of disease, especially when we have contaminated water supplies with raw sewage. I think fecal matter can spread diseases. You have some E. coli in there. B says global warming, which can transfer carriers of disease. This is true. Warmer temperatures means that we're going to have more vector-related diseases. Same thing for letter C. And then E, rural poverty, which causes people to move into urban areas. That's true. It's increased in density. So the only one that's not is D, exposure to neurotoxins. So neurotoxins are not related to infectious diseases. Neurotoxins would be like lead, mercury, heavy metals, things like that. Number 77. And we just saw this question recently. Biological control methods for managing insect pests are effective for reasons that include which of the following? Biological controls, again, to remind you, is using the predator of a pest in order to reduce the amount of pesticides that are used on a farm, and they are not used to promote genetic resistance. So the purpose of them is to control the pests. We're really trying to slow genetic resistance, so that if you're using IPM or integrated pest management, you're using a little bit of everything. Some biological control, a small amount of pesticides, maybe some pheromone traps, using crop rotation, having like an area that is like a habitat for the predator of the pest. So using all of those. So the answer here is just 2 and 3, which is the letter D. Number 79. West Nile virus was identified in the Western Hemisphere during the summer of 1999 and was associated with human, equine, and avian deaths. A lot of students that know what equine is, that is meaning horse. The virus was acquired by, and so the answer here was D, being bitten by an infected mosquito. So the West Nile virus is transmitted by mosquitoes. Obviously, it's not A. We don't really eat the same things as, say, birds and, say, horses. Maybe contacted with polluted water, coming in contact with a sick horse, bird, inhaling contaminated airborne droplets. This is like one of those where you got to know it. So if you didn't, you didn't. And that was it. So, again, good luck tomorrow. You guys are going to do great. I know you are. And I don't know. I'll see you hopefully, if not tomorrow, on Friday. So good luck.